Desperate alien seeks servitude under an Earthling HFY Sci-Fi. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, back to our main character. Alex Carter had always been used to the quiet life. Born and raised in a small town in the Midwest, he had joined the Earth Space Defense Force to escape the monotony, seeking something greater among the stars. He never expected to find himself standing in the middle of a diplomatic mess between human and alien politics. But here he was, in the heart of a grand space station orbiting a distant planet, about to be assigned to the most unusual duty of his career. Alex, a man of few words but sharp instincts, had always found a sense of peace in routine. As a decorated officer, he was used to high-risk situations. Yet, nothing had prepared him for this. The Tan Dominion was an empire of unimaginable size, spanning multiple galaxies, ruled by the regal and mysterious Queen Nisara. But it wasn't the queen herself Alex was tasked to protect, it was her clone, the royal proxy, an exact replica of the queen who carried all her memories and mannerisms, but not her title. The clone, named Lara, was far from just a bodyguard's responsibility. She was a sentient being, with thoughts, feelings, and, surprisingly, her own desires. When Alex first met her, it was clear there was more to Lara than just a diplomatic tool. She was beautiful in an otherworldly way, with bright crimson skin and silver hair that shimmered like stardust. But it was her eyes, an intense shade of blue, that held Alex's attention. Despite her royal heritage, there was something vulnerable about her. She wasn't just the queen's clone, she had her own personality, her own will. The assignment was straightforward enough. Alex was to ensure Lara's safety during her diplomatic duties on Earth. Yet, as they spent more time together, he realized that the situation wasn't as simple as it seemed. Lara had been created to serve the queen's interests, to fulfill her duties without question. But Alex could see it in her eyes. She was a person, not just a clone. She had desires, fears, and a deep yearning for something more than just obedience. And that was when things began to shift. At first, it was subtle, a small gesture, a slight change in her posture when they spoke. But soon, Lara began to open up to him, revealing parts of herself that Alex never expected. She wasn't the cold, calculated servant he had been briefed to protect. She was a woman caught between duty and desire, struggling to reconcile her role as a royal proxy with the emotions she was beginning to feel for Alex. It wasn't long before Alex found himself in a position he had never anticipated. The lines between duty and personal feelings began to blur, and the weight of his mission felt heavier with each passing day. The more time they spent together, the more Alex realized that their connection was something neither of them could easily ignore. As Lara's feelings for Alex deepened, so did the tension between them. The strict rules of the Tan Dominion and the expectations of their roles threatened to tear them apart. But despite the growing complications, neither could deny the undeniable pull between them. Alex had always been a man of principle, a man who followed orders without question. But this mission, this relationship, was unlike anything he had ever faced. And as the days went on, he had to confront the ultimate question: could he remain loyal to his duty and ignore his feelings for Lara, or would he risk it all for the chance to be with her? The stakes were high, and the choices they would make could alter the course of their lives forever. I could feel the tension in the air as Alex and Lara walked through the grand halls of the embassy. The soft hum of distant voices and the faint echo of footsteps reverberated off the high marble walls, but the space between them felt oddly silent. As the mission progressed, Alex found it increasingly difficult to separate his professional obligations from the undeniable pull between him and Lara. Despite the formality of his assignment, the line between duty and something more began to blur. Lara, despite her role as the queen's proxy, was not the cold, emotionless figure he had expected. The more time they spent together, the more he saw the person behind the royal duties, the woman who struggled with her own sense of identity and purpose. She wasn't just a servant to the queen's will, she was her own being, caught between her duty and the unexpected feelings she had for Alex. The evening after their tour of Earth's cultural districts, Alex found himself in his quarters, reviewing the security details for the following day. But his thoughts kept drifting back to Lara. He couldn't help but replay their conversation in the museum, her voice soft, asking about freedom, about choice. It was a question that lingered with him long after they had parted ways for the evening. Freedom, something she, a clone of the Tan Dominion's queen, was never meant to experience. Alex had seen it in her eyes, the quiet longing for a life of her own, not dictated by the whims of the monarchy. But how could she, a being created for the sole purpose of serving the queen, ever have that? The sound of a soft knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. Alex opened it to find Lara standing in the hallway, her usual regal composure softened by the vulnerability in her eyes. "Commander, may I speak with you for a moment?" she asked, her voice calm but tinged with something unspoken. "Of course, come in," Alex said, stepping aside to let her enter. As she crossed the threshold, Alex couldn't help but notice the change in her posture. She wasn't the confident, composed royal proxy he had seen earlier. This was Lara, the woman who was struggling with her own inner turmoil. Lara stood by the window, gazing out at the starry expanse beyond the station. "I've been thinking," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "About what we talked about earlier, in the gallery. Freedom, choice." Alex nodded, unsure of where this conversation would lead. "You know, Commander," Lara continued, turning to face him. "I was created to serve. That's all I've ever known. I've never had the chance to make my own decisions, to live a life of my own." She paused, her gaze locking with his. "But being with you, working alongside you, it's the first time I've felt like I matter as more than just a tool for the Queen's needs." Alex felt a pang in his chest. He had never considered what it must be like for her, to live a life where her every action was dictated by another's will. "Lara, you do matter. You're not just a tool, he paused, searching for the right words. "You're your own person." Lara shook her head slowly. "But I'm not. Not really. The Queen's memories, her experiences, they're mine too. But my existence is only for her." Alex could see the pain in her eyes, the realization that she was trapped in a life she didn't choose. "What if you didn't have to be?" he asked, his voice softer now. "What if you could have a choice, a life where you decide what happens next?" Lara looked at him, the weight of his words sinking in. "I don't know if that's possible," she said quietly. "But I want to believe it is." The silence between them hung heavy, both of them aware of the unspoken tension that had been building. For the first time since their paths had crossed, Alex felt a deep sense of longing, not just for the woman standing before him, but for the future that might be possible, one where she was free to choose her own destiny, free from the constraints of her royal duty. He stepped closer to her, his heart pounding in his chest. "Maybe we can find out together," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Lara met his gaze, her eyes searching his for sincerity. "Together," she repeated, a faint smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "Yes," Alex replied, his voice steady now, filled with conviction. "You deserve to have a choice. And if it means breaking all the rules, I'll help you find it." The air between them shifted, and for the first time since their meeting, Lara seemed to relax, the weight of her burdens momentarily lifted by the promise of something more. Something real. As they stood there, the universe outside the window seemed to stretch on forever, but in that moment, Alex knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Because sometimes, the most unexpected connections could lead to the greatest of adventures. The days that followed were filled with uncertainty and quiet moments of connection between Alex and Lara. They continued their duties as expected, moving through diplomatic functions and security protocols, but there was a growing sense of tension between them. Neither spoke openly about the promise they had made to each other, but it lingered in the air, unspoken yet powerful. Alex had begun to notice small changes in Lara. The way she carried herself had shifted slightly, there was more confidence in her step, more fire in her eyes. It was as though she was beginning to realize that she wasn't bound by the chains she had once accepted as her fate. And every time their eyes met, there was an unspoken understanding, a shared acknowledgement of something deeper than duty. Lara, for her part, was beginning to see the world in a different light. She had spent so many years as an extension of the Queen, bound by royal expectations and duty, that she had almost forgotten what it felt like to have her own desires, her own sense of purpose. But with Alex, she felt free. Free to think for herself, free to want things beyond mere survival. The thought terrified her, but it also filled her with a strange sense of hope. One evening, after another exhausting round of diplomatic meetings, Alex found himself in the embassy's quiet garden, taking a moment to clear his head. He had been reflecting on everything that had happened, the promise he had made to Lara, and the growing feelings he was developing for her. He had always been a man of logic, of reason, but Lara made him question everything he thought he knew about himself. She was an alien, created to serve, bound by rules that he couldn't even begin to understand, yet in her presence, he felt something stirring inside him that he hadn't felt in years. He wasn't sure if it was love, he wasn't sure if it was even possible for something so complex to develop between them, but he knew one thing for certain: he didn't want to let her go. The soft rustling of leaves interrupted his thoughts. He turned to see Lara walking toward him, her silhouette framed by the dim light of the garden. Her expression was calm, but there was something different in the way she moved, as though she had made a decision. "Alex," she said, her voice soft but steady. "I've been thinking about what you said. About having a choice, about being free." He looked at her, his heart racing. "Lara, you don't have to do anything. You don't want to." She shook her head, stepping closer. "No, I've made up my mind," she said. "I've been living my life for someone else for so long, but I think it's time I made my own decisions. I want to be free. And I want to see where this goes. With you." Her words hit him like a wave, unexpected but welcomed. He stepped forward, meeting her gaze. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. She nodded, her eyes filled with determination. "Yes. I'm sure." The air between them seemed to shift, the distance that had once separated them now gone. Alex reached out, gently taking her hand in his. In that moment, all the fears and doubts that had plagued him seemed to fade away. They weren't just a human and an alien anymore. They were two people, connected by something real. Something worth fighting for. As the stars above them glittered like diamonds in the sky, Alex knew that the road ahead would be filled with challenges. Their relationship was anything but conventional, and the risks they were taking were immense. But for the first time in a long time, he felt a sense of peace. Whatever happened, they would face it together. The days following their conversation in the garden were filled with a new sense of purpose. Alex and Lara continued their duties, but there was an unspoken shift between them, a growing bond that neither of them could deny. Alex had always known the risks of their mission, but now, with Lara's decision to seek her own path, everything seemed more complicated. But complicated didn't necessarily mean impossible. In the days that followed, Alex found himself more and more invested in Lara's well-being, not just as a protector, but as someone who cared deeply for her. He wasn't sure where this would lead, but for the first time in a long while, he felt like he was truly living. Lara, too, seemed to find a new sense of confidence. She had always been aware of her role as the Queen's proxy, a position of great power yet limited freedom. But with Alex by her side, she began to see the possibility of something more. She could choose her own future, and that future didn't have to be defined by the Queen's needs. One evening, as they sat together in the embassy's observation lounge, overlooking the stars, Lara turned to Alex, her gaze intense. "Alex, do you think it's possible for someone like me to truly be free? Not just in body, but in mind and spirit?" Alex looked at her, his heart heavy with the weight of her question. "I think anyone has the potential to be free," he said softly. "It's just a matter of believing it and being willing to fight for it." Lara nodded, a quiet determination in her eyes. "Then that's what I'll do. I'll fight for my freedom, no matter what it takes." The next few days were a whirlwind of decisions and preparations. Alex and Lara began to strategize. It wasn't just about her personal freedom, it was about finding a way to navigate the political minefield of the Tan Dominion, where defying the Queen could have disastrous consequences. But they were both determined to find a way. As the days passed, the tension between them grew, not from the pressure of their mission, but from the undeniable pull they felt toward each other. There were moments when Alex would catch Lara's eye, and for a brief second, the world around them would fade away. They were just two people, sharing something real, something neither of them had ever expected. One night, as they stood on the balcony of the embassy, watching the distant stars twinkle in the inky black sky, Lara took a deep breath and turned to Alex. "I've never felt like this before," she admitted quietly. "Like I'm not just a part of something bigger, something that controls me. For once, I feel like I can control my own destiny." Alex reached out, taking her hand in his. "You can," he said softly. "And I'll be right here with you, every step of the way." Lara smiled, a look of pure relief crossing her face. "Thank you, Alex. I don't think I could do this without you." Alex squeezed her hand, his heart full. "You don't have to do it alone. We're in this together." The days that followed were filled with small victories. Lara began to assert her independence, making decisions that were once unthinkable for her. She spoke to the Tan officials with a newfound confidence, no longer just the Queen's proxy, but a woman who was carving her own path. But the road ahead was still fraught with danger. There were whispers in the corridors of power, rumors that the Queen's wrath would soon be directed at Lara for her defiance. Alex and Lara knew that their time was running out. They had to make their move before it was too late. As the tension reached its peak, Lara turned to Alex one final time. "I don't know what's going to happen, but I want you to know that whatever it is, I'm glad we're doing this together." Alex nodded, his expression serious but filled with determination. "Whatever happens, Lara, we face it together." And with that, they stepped into the unknown, ready to fight for their future, whatever it might hold. As the days passed, Alex and Lara grew closer, their bond solidifying with every shared moment of uncertainty. The tension between them was no longer just about their mission, it was about something more profound. They had become each other's anchor in the storm, two individuals navigating a world that seemed determined to keep them apart. Lara had embraced her newfound sense of agency, taking small steps toward a life of independence. She began making decisions for herself, questioning the orders she had always followed without question. There was a growing sense of liberation in her, but also a weight of responsibility. She knew the risks of defying the Queen, but for the first time in her life, she was willing to face them. Meanwhile, Alex remained by her side, providing support, but also struggling with his own feelings. He had always been a man of duty, but now he found himself torn between his obligations and his growing affection for Lara. He hadn't expected this mission to evolve into something so personal, yet here they were, facing a future together that neither of them had planned for. It was a future that came with dangers, challenges, and uncertain outcomes, but it was a future they both wanted. One evening, as they sat together in the embassy's lounge, gazing out at the stars, Alex turned to Lara. "You know, when I first came on this mission, I thought it would be just another job. Something to do, something to get through. But now..." He paused, searching for the right words. "Now it's so much more." Lara looked at him, her silver eyes meeting his with an intensity that made his heart skip a beat. "I know what you mean," she replied softly. "I never thought I would feel free. But with you, it's like I finally have a choice. A chance to live my own life." Alex reached out, taking her hand in his. "And you will. Whatever happens, we'll find a way." The promise in his words was real, and Lara could see that he meant every syllable. She squeezed his hand, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "I believe you." As the days went on, their relationship continued to grow stronger. They faced the political challenges of their mission with determination, each step bringing them closer to the moment when they would make their move. But there was still the looming threat of the Queen's wrath. Lara's defiance had not gone unnoticed, and whispers of rebellion were beginning to circulate among the Tan officials. They knew that if they waited too long, it might be too late to escape the consequences of their actions. One night, as they prepared to leave for a high-level diplomatic meeting, Alex received an urgent message. The Queen's guards had arrived at the embassy, and they were demanding to see Lara. The time had come. There was no turning back now. Alex and Lara exchanged a glance, both knowing that their moment of reckoning had arrived. "Are you ready?" Alex asked, his voice steady, but his heart pounding. Lara nodded, her expression resolute. "I'm ready. Let's go." Together, they left the safety of the embassy, stepping into the unknown. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: they would face it together. Whatever challenges awaited them, they would navigate them side by side, ready to fight for their freedom, their future, and the life they had chosen to build. And as they walked into the night, the stars above seemed to shine just a little brighter, as if the universe itself was watching, waiting to see how their story would unfold. The atmosphere in the embassy was tense as Alex and Lara made their way through the hallways. Every step felt heavier than the last, the weight of their decision pressing down on them. The message had come at the worst possible time. The Queen's guards were here, and they were demanding Lara's presence. It wasn't just a routine check, it was a warning. A warning that their actions had been noticed, and that the consequences of defying the Queen were now inevitable. As they approached the secure exit, Alex turned to Lara, his expression serious. "We don't have much time. We need to move fast." Lara nodded, her silver eyes locked on his. "I'm not afraid anymore, Alex. Whatever happens, we face it together." The resolve in her voice was clear, and for the first time since their journey had begun, Alex believed her. They had come too far to turn back now. Together, they slipped out of the embassy and into the quiet night. The stars above seemed to shimmer with promise, but the path ahead was fraught with danger. Lara had been the Queen's proxy for so long, living a life dictated by royal duties. But tonight, everything changed. Tonight, they were running from the very empire that had once controlled her, seeking a future where she could be free. They boarded a small transport ship, one that Alex had arranged for their escape. The vessel hummed softly, the only sound in the vast emptiness of space. Lara sat beside Alex, her fingers nervously tapping the armrest. "Do you think we can make it?" she asked quietly. Alex glanced at her, offering a reassuring smile. "We will. You've made the right choice, Lara. We'll find a place where no one can control us, where you can live the life you deserve." The ship powered up, and with a gentle hum, they left the station behind, the looming threat of the Tan Dominion slowly fading into the distance. But even as they flew through the void, Alex knew the road ahead would not be easy. The Queen's influence stretched far, and there would be those who would stop at nothing to bring Lara back. "How do you feel?" Alex asked after a long pause, breaking the silence. Lara looked out of the window, her gaze fixed on the endless stretch of stars. "I feel free," she said softly, her voice tinged with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. "For the first time, I feel like I have control over my own life." Alex reached over, placing a hand on hers. "You do. And you always have." The silence that followed was comfortable, filled with the quiet hum of the ship's engines. Lara turned her hand, intertwining her fingers with Alex's. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "For everything." Alex squeezed her hand gently, his heart swelling with a mixture of pride and affection. "You don't have to thank me," he replied. "This is our journey now, Lara. And I'm not going anywhere." As the stars passed by, the unknown stretched before them. There were still many challenges ahead, places to hide, people to trust, and dangers to face. But in that moment, as they flew into the unknown, Alex knew that together, they could handle anything. They had each other, and that was all that mattered. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, it felt like it belonged to them. As the ship sped through the stars, the possibilities seemed endless, and Alex couldn't help but feel that this was just the beginning of something extraordinary. As the days passed in the quiet, dimly lit cabin of their transport, Alex and Lara settled into a routine. They were far from the prying eyes of the Tan Dominion, but the constant uncertainty weighed heavily on both of them. They had escaped, yes, but they both knew it was only a matter of time before their absence would be noticed. The pursuit would be relentless. They needed a plan, a safe place, and a way to stay hidden long enough to start anew. Alex kept his thoughts to himself most of the time, but Lara knew him well enough to see the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes would linger on the navigation systems, calculating their route as if it was a race against time. She, on the other hand, was still coming to terms with the reality of her newfound freedom. For years, her life had been defined by the Queen's will, by duties that were not hers to choose. Now, she was free to decide her own path, but the weight of that freedom was both exhilarating and terrifying. One evening, after a quiet dinner, Lara found herself standing by the viewport, gazing out at the endless expanse of space. The stars were distant, cold, and beautiful. "Do you ever wonder what it will be like when we find somewhere to settle?" Lara asked, her voice soft but filled with a sense of longing. Alex, who had been silently going through their supplies, looked up and walked over to her. He stood beside her for a moment, taking in the view. "I've thought about it," he said, his voice steady. "I think about it every day. But I know one thing for sure, wherever we go, we'll be together. And that's enough for me." Lara turned to him, meeting his gaze. "What if it's not enough?" she asked quietly. "What if we can't outrun our past? What if they find us?" Alex reached out, gently taking her hand. "We'll make sure they don't find us," he said, his voice firm with conviction. "We'll stay ahead of them, we'll lay low, and we'll build a life together." Lara nodded slowly, her heart swelling with the promise of a future she never thought possible. She had spent so long living in the shadow of the Queen, never daring to dream of a life beyond duty and obligation. But with Alex, the future seemed wide open, full of endless possibilities. In the quiet of the cabin, they shared a moment of peace, a brief respite from the uncertainty that loomed over them. But both of them knew that the road ahead would be anything but easy. They would have to be smart, resourceful, and relentless in their pursuit of freedom. And yet, as they sat together, Alex felt a sense of calm wash over him. They would make it through this. He was sure of it. The next morning, as they continued their journey, they began discussing their options for finding a safe haven. Lara had grown up hearing stories of hidden colonies, planets on the fringes of the known galaxy where people could disappear, where the law of the Tan Dominion didn't reach. It wasn't much to go on, but it was a start. They set their course for one of those planets, a place that Lara had heard about in hushed whispers during her time in the royal court. It was a place of refuge, a haven for those who needed to vanish, and it was as close to a sanctuary as they could hope for. But even as they made their way toward this distant world, a nagging thought tugged at Alex's mind. The Tan Dominion was vast, its reach far beyond what they could imagine. The Queen would stop at nothing to find her. And that meant they couldn't afford to make a single misstep. The reality of their situation weighed heavily on them, but in that moment, Alex realized something that brought him peace. They were no longer fugitives, living in the shadows of a world that didn't understand them. They were two people, bound by a common goal, facing the unknown together. And no matter what came next, that was enough for him. As the stars streaked by and the distant planet came into view, Alex couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could start again. Together. The journey to the distant planet was long, and the silence between Alex and Lara spoke volumes. They had been through so much together already, but this new chapter felt like uncharted territory. Lara could feel the weight of their decision pressing down on her, but with every passing day, she grew more determined to carve out a future for herself, a future that didn't rely on anyone's expectations but her own. The transport ship hummed softly as it navigated through the vast emptiness of space, the stars outside a constant reminder of just how far they had come. Lara stood by the window, her hands resting lightly on the cold glass, looking out at the infinite expanse. She thought of the life she had left behind, the court, the rigid rules, the expectations. She had never truly been free, but now, as she gazed at the distant stars, she felt a flicker of hope. Alex walked up behind her, his steps quiet, but she felt his presence before he spoke. "We're almost there," he said, his voice low, but steady. "Just a few more hours." Lara turned to face him, her expression calm but with a hint of uncertainty. "What if this isn't enough?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "What if we get there and find that it's not what we thought it would be?" Alex took a step closer, his eyes meeting hers with a warmth that grounded her. "We don't know what we'll find, Lara. But what I do know is that we're taking control of our own lives now. We make the future we want, together." She felt a surge of emotion at his words. The weight of everything they had been through, all the moments of fear and uncertainty, suddenly felt a little lighter. For the first time, she realized that she didn't have to carry the burden of her past alone. Alex was there, by her side, and that made all the difference. As the planet grew larger on the viewport, Lara took a deep breath, allowing herself a moment to embrace the unknown. They didn't have all the answers, but they had each other, and for now, that was enough. The ship entered the planet's atmosphere, and the descent was smooth, but Lara could feel the tension building in her chest. This was it. This was the beginning of something new. The transport touched down on the surface with a soft thud, and Alex gave her a reassuring smile before he powered down the systems. "Welcome to our new beginning," he said, his tone filled with quiet optimism. Lara stepped off the ship first, her boots meeting the soft, unfamiliar ground. The air was fresh, the landscape sprawling and untouched, unlike anything she had ever known. It was beautiful, but it felt foreign, just like her life now. They weren't just escaping their past anymore, they were creating a future. The reality of it all hit her in waves. They had no contacts here, no allies, no safety net. It was just the two of them, facing whatever challenges this new world would throw at them. But for the first time in her life, Lara didn't feel afraid. She felt free. Alex joined her outside, looking around, taking in their surroundings. "It's not much," he said with a grin. "But it's ours." Lara looked at him, her eyes softening. "It's more than enough," she replied, her voice filled with a quiet determination. They stood there for a moment, letting the weight of their decision sink in. The future was uncertain, and the road ahead would be difficult, but for the first time in a long time, Lara felt like she was exactly where she needed to be. With Alex, she had found a new beginning, a chance to be herself, without the constraints of her past. And with that, they turned toward the horizon, ready to face whatever came next, together. The days that followed were filled with a new sense of purpose. Alex and Lara began to adjust to their new life on the distant planet. They spent their days exploring the vast landscape, learning about the world around them, and slowly carving out a place to call home. It was a peaceful existence, far removed from the chaos they had left behind. But peace didn't come easily. The fear of being discovered still lingered, and they both knew that the Tan Dominion wasn't far behind. They had to remain vigilant, careful about who they trusted and where they went. Despite the ever-present danger, Alex and Lara found solace in each other. Their connection grew stronger with each passing day. They shared everything, their hopes, their fears, and their dreams for the future. Lara had never known such closeness, such understanding. For the first time in her life, she felt like she wasn't just a tool to be used, but a person with the right to make her own choices. One evening, after a long day of working on their shelter, Alex sat beside Lara, looking up at the stars. "Do you ever miss it?" he asked quietly, his voice carrying the weight of a question he had been meaning to ask for days. Lara turned to him, her expression thoughtful. "Miss what?" she asked, not entirely sure where the conversation was headed. "The old life," Alex replied, his gaze still fixed on the night sky. "The court, the power, everything you had before all of this." Lara was silent for a moment, contemplating the question. "At first, I did," she admitted. "It was all I knew. The rules, the structure, the duty. But now I realize that it wasn't real. It was a life that was given to me, not one I chose for myself." She paused, her fingers lightly brushing against Alex's. "I don't miss it anymore. What I miss is the idea of freedom. The idea that I can choose who I want to be." Alex turned to her then, his expression softening. "You have that now," he said, his voice gentle. "You've always had it. You just needed to believe it." Lara smiled, a smile that felt more genuine than any she had shared in years. "I think I'm starting to believe it," she said quietly. They sat together for a while longer, letting the silence of the night settle around them. It was a peaceful silence, one that spoke of understanding and shared dreams. But as much as they longed for peace, they both knew that their fight wasn't over. The threat of the Tan Dominion still loomed over them, and they couldn't afford to relax. The time for hiding would come soon enough, but for now, they held on to each other and to the future they were building together. They had no idea what lay ahead, no idea what dangers might be waiting for them. But whatever it was, they would face it together. With each passing day, Alex and Lara grew closer, their bond unbreakable. They were no longer just two people trying to survive, they were a team, partners in every sense of the word. And for the first time in a long time, Lara felt truly alive, truly free. The road ahead was uncertain, but with Alex by her side, she felt ready to face whatever challenges came their way. Together, they would build a future, one that was truly theirs. No more hiding. No more running. Just two people, carving out their place in the stars.